Hey everyone, I just finished reading The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Bruce D. Perry, who's a psychiatrist in the States. Straight out, I'm just going to say, excellent book, 10 out of 10. Not easy to read, very, very distressing because the chapters are each about one of his patients, and his patients are all children, and some of them have been through some awful abuse, and some of them have done some awful things. And what he does is over the course of his career, he's developed something called I forget now, neurosequential therapy model. And the idea is that the brain develops, or key areas of the brain develop at different stages of our lives, and if the required stimulation for those areas to develop isn't available, then those brain areas won't develop. So you have children with deformed brains, children with underdeveloped brains. But his therapy, his model, sets about identifying which part of the brain has not properly developed and then providing the stimulation for that to develop. So you don't treat a child according to their chronological age, you treat a child according to the age of their brain or the area of their brain which didn't develop due to neglect at a certain age. Now, that's sort of the findings and the theory. The book itself is amazing, it's fascinating, it's very moving, it's difficult to read. And there's one case of a boy who was left alone from the age of about 4 months until he was a few years old. Every day his mother, who had some learning difficulties and found it very difficult to cope with him, would just feed him in the morning and then go for a walk with her other son, who'd become her best friend because they'd moved to a new city away from the extended family who had helped to raise her first son. Now, because the first son got all of the stimulation required to develop normally, he turned out normal person with a job and a family. The second son followed a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old girl into their house. They lived in the same apartment block as him, murdered them both, then raped them. He did not have the holding, the touching and everything that causes the appropriate part of the brain to develop, which allows humans to value other humans and to understand that relationships are valuable. He did understand what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't feel empathy. So it's quite chilling. At the prosecution where the boy is sentenced, he sees the victim's family crying, and he simply says to the therapist, to the author, "Why are they crying? I'm the one who's going to prison." It's quite amazing what neglect can do and what kind of behaviours it can lead to. One of the things that he says at the end of the book is, in order to, we've moved away from extended families, we've moved away from living, I think in 1500s, the average family group, the average child would regularly be exposed to 20 people, and now people are living more and more alone. And that social aspect of life is very, very important for proper development, for mental health. Sure, in the consumerism, the globalization, the westernization is everyone has their own mansion or their own high-rise skyscraper penthouse, but you actually need family, you actually need extended social groups because we are a social animal. Without that, your brain doesn't develop properly and you end up in some cases doing some pretty awful things. And then there are stories in there about how bad therapies can be, how much damage they can do, how misguided they can be. There was a story of a therapist who basically had his patients reenact their sexual abuse that they experienced as children so as to come to terms with it. How did he get them to reenact it? Well, he brought sex toys along and had them basically perform oral sex on them or insert them or whatever, and he filmed it. This guy was obviously not a therapist, he was abusing children. It's a fascinating book. What more can I say? Give it 10 out of 10. It's well written, it's hard to read, very moving, very informative. At the end there's actually a study guide, which I didn't read, questions for each chapter, to give you another idea of one of the points I found very interesting was a lot of the children who are very messed up come from, have been raised by parents who don't quite know what they're doing. There was the murderer's mum who had some learning difficulties. There was another boy. The book is The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Now, his mother couldn't cope with him. I think she was a drug addict, I can't remember. Left him with her mother, who was morbidly obese. Her mother died, and so it fell to the boy's grandmother's boyfriend to raise him. He'd never had any children of his own. he was a bit slow, learning difficulties again, and he was a dog breeder, so he raised him as a dog. So when the psychiatrist Bruce Perry first met this boy, he was in a cage in a hospital throwing his shit at everybody. But he managed to make him better. Quite amazing, right? Read the book. It's not the first one. Is it the first or the second one I'm reviewing this show? I don't know, but I give it 10 out of 10. It's one of the best things I've read in ages. It's not mine. I borrowed it from my sister's bookshelf, so I'll have to return it to her. But there you go. There's the review. There's the book.